I can start. Well, thank you to all who were able to attend tonight. We really appreciate you being here. Just so everyone knows, you will not be able to share your screen or unmute your video. However, if you have any questions or comments, you can type them in the chat or the question and answer feature. John and I will both be viewing that, and at the end there will be time for questions. This will also be recorded and will be able to be viewed again on the city website as well as on the local Channel 16 loop that Shoreview has. So without further ado, it is my pleasure and privilege to have John be tonight's speaker. John Suzukita is a longtime member of Shoreview's Environmental Quality Committee, and he has reduced his home's energy consumption by 75% over the last 15 years. He will be speaking about that experience with the goal of demystifying energy efficiency products and systems from a practical and real-world user's perspective. He'll share tips and advice about LED lights, heat pump water heaters, heat pump clothes dryers, solar panels, ground loop heat pumps for water for heating and cooling, as well as electric cars. So thank you again, John, for taking the time to join us tonight and give your presentation. Whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Great, thank you, Maria. I probably also add to that introduction that I'm probably the only person that I know that looks forward to getting the utility bills every month. So with that, for some reason or other, there we go. There's a bit of a time delay, it looks like, on the switches here. So basically what I'm going to do is to try to demystify terms and energy efficiency and electrification, things like that. And to do that, I'm going to go through 6 different categories of things from lowest cost to highest cost. And so starting with LED lights and moving on to talk about heat pump hot water heaters and heat pump clothes dryers, solar panels, a ground loop heat pump for both heating and cooling. Some people may call them geothermal heat pumps. And lastly, electric cars and some of the practical aspects of all of those. So that's you'll see this thing pop up at least a half a dozen more times because I'll just keep coming back to that to say, here's where we're at in the agenda. I do like to start just about any talk that I give with what this is and what it isn't. So what it is I just have a passion for using energy most efficiently. So that's just the way I'm made up. It's really it's a personal view of mine on real world practical things, user experience perspectives. It's really to share what I call learn by doing to help you, hopefully. What it isn't, it's not an advertisement for any brand. I'm not sponsored by somebody. It's also not to convince anyone of anything. It's not full of a lot of technical jargon. It's also not detailed financial paybacks because they vary greatly. There's just a lot of variables. And so I've got some rough rules of thumb in here for you, but it's not meant to be detailed. One of the things about energy is obviously it's a very complex topic. So this is really just all about actions on one home. And hopefully by sharing it, it'll help that demystification process. The first thing I want to start with is what's electrification? I don't know how many people really have heard of this term, but it's becoming more and more widely used. In a nutshell, it's basically houses run only on electricity, not gas, like my house. And so the vertical pipe on the left is coming in from Xcel Energy, and the pipe sticking out of my house is what used to be connected. In fact, Xcel, when they came out to disconnect it, they said, well, what would you like us to do? And I said, I think you should just cap it off because eventually when we sell the house, somebody else might want to change things out. So just keep it there so it's easier for them. But that's what electrification really means. It runs on, the whole house only runs on electricity. There's no gas in there. And basically it leaves the challenge of handling carbon emissions by burning things at the utility, not at each home. So that's just one definition I wanted to start with. The other thing I like to do with talks like this is to kind of start so you know where it's going. And so I'm going to explain where it ends up, and then I'll explain how we get there. And I'll wrap up with some of these same slides. But basically, I'm going to show you a graph, the results, basically over 16 years, what the energy reduction looks like. I'm going to give you a list of takeaways to consider doing in your home. And then I'm going to show you a chart that was a bit of an eye opener for me. And that was a chart of how energy was used in my home before I started doing all of these things. So the first chart, and again, I'll spend more time on this at the end, but this is just to give you a picture. Basically, 2004 and 2005 are what I consider to be base years. Those are 2 years where I didn't do anything and started doing things after that. And so the end result is we basically reduced the energy consumption in the house by about 77%, to the point where now our average utility cost is just a little over $1,000 a year for everything, heating, cooling, plug use, everything included, and it's all electric. So the black line at the top represents the total. The red line is the electric usage, and the gray line is the gas usage. And so you can see as we go through this, I'll be explaining certain things that happen, starting with LED lights, but going through the biggest drop that you can see. The reason that the gas line went down so much is we switched to the ground loop heat pump for heating and cooling. Dramatic decrease in gas consumption, to the point where Xcel started kidding me about the fact that I paid more for the use of the meter than paid for the gas. And that's very much true. And that continued for a number of years until last year. Again, a couple of the topics I'll talk about, we implemented a heat pump hot water heater and a heat pump dryer. That's when we were able to completely get rid of gas. And you can see that's why the gas line starts to really go to zero in 2021. And the black line on top, the total energy, you can see what happened. And so when I say it dropped from 77%, again, without going into too much technical jargon, if you just call energy 40 on the left side there, it went down to basically a little bit less than 10. And so that's the end result that we'll develop and then come back to. Here's a few takeaways that I'll be talking about. And so I wanted to put these thoughts in your head now so that as we go through this discussion and then come back to this, hopefully it'll become clearer. But I'll talk a lot about heat pumps. You've heard the term quite a bit already. They're not new. Basically a refrigerator, a dehumidifier, air conditioners in your house, in your car, they're all heat pumps. Heat pump is a word to describe all those different things, but obviously they've been around for a long time, very proven. There's some things to consider. One of the things that I learned as I'm going through all of this is just by switching from incandescent lights through compact fluorescent and then to LED, basically after running an electric car for about 1.5 years, I found that the energy you save by doing the change in light bulbs just about powers an electric car for a year. So 12,000 miles, right? Another thing to think about is 80% of the hot water heaters that get replaced on an emergency basis. No surprise. I mean, who thinks about wanting to replace their hot water heater until you wake up and there's, it broke, right? And either you're not getting hot water or it started leaking. And so that's very, very common. So hopefully by putting these types of thoughts out there, you could consider, if you've got an old hot water heater, you may want to consider doing this proactively, because it'll take a little bit longer than just calling somebody to put in a new gas or new electric hot water heater. So that's just a takeaway to think about. Things like covering windows with plastic, night setback thermostats, or getting a home energy analysis. The fact that the city of Shoreview actually has home improvement funds available for energy efficiency improvements. Those are some takeaways just to think about. And again, we'll spend a little more time on this later. Now, this to me, this next thing was a little bit of I never really thought about that. 25% of the energy that was used in my house before doing anything was electricity. So lights, running the electric oven and stove, air conditioning, everything that's plugged in, that was 25%. 75% of it was gas. And so that's of which 90% of that was in heating and 10% was for hot water and the dryer. So it's just kind of interesting. I thought I never really looked at that before. And so quite frankly, when I first started down this line and replaced all the lights and was feeling pretty good, I got like a 25% drop in my electricity usage. Well, 25% of 25% is really 6%. So good, it's good. But I kind of stopped feeling good about that when I realized that the vast majority of the energy in the house is used for heating mostly. And so that was a bit of an aha. The other thing is a bit of a takeaway here is purely safety. It's not very often we hear this, but in fact, it happened not too long ago. I think one of the northern suburbs, had just a tragedy where a family died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Without burning any gas in the house, there are no emissions of carbon monoxide. So it eliminates that. And every now and then you hear of a house exploding because of a gas leak. Obviously, you have to take that away and it removes that possibility. So that's just a very important safety aspect of it as well. So those are some takeaways, again, that we'll come back to. And this is just the pie chart of what I just talked through. The red showing the gas that's used for heating, was used for heating, and then the gas energy that went into the dryer and the hot water heater. As you can see from the pie chart there, that's about 3/4. In fact, it was exactly 3/4 of the energy was used for those things. And then about 25% of the energy was used for lights and air conditioning and all other electrical things, right? So it was really kind of an aha to me. The other thing is, in these northern climates, right, heating is the energy consumer. I mean, that graph kind of shows it. That's a big deal. So the bottom line out of that is better insulated houses are needed. So frankly, every time I see a house with conventional insulation put in, I think, oh, that's a wasted opportunity, because it'd be great to not even have to think about heating using as much energy as we use for houses, even if it's very efficient, like my house. It'd just be better not to have to heat it in the first place if you had better insulation. So that's just a quick feel for what the end result is. I'm going to come back to these, and hopefully by going through each one of these steps, you'll leave here with a better understanding. So again, I mentioned I'll show this a half a dozen times. From lowest cost to highest cost, first thing I'm going to talk about is LED lights, followed by those others. And in each one, I'm going to talk about this format: advantages and disadvantages. So LED lights, and these are, again, just my perspectives, right? It uses a fifth, or only 20% of the energy of incandescent bulbs. And you realize that right away. If you've got a hot bulb and you're trying to take it out, you can do it with an LED light. You can't do it with incandescent. You'll burn yourself. It's creating so much heat. That's the inefficiency. And as I mentioned, the energy saved by just converting my entire house to LED lights can power an electric car for about a year. Another advantage, it's cost competitive now. When compact fluorescent lights first came out, Xcel Energy came out with this deal, and a long time ago, and I bought these really ugly looking tall compact fluorescent lights, and I put a few of those in. They're expensive. They didn't last long. They're hard to recycle, get recycled. Now, LED lights are very cost competitive. A disadvantage is disposal. Although Tim Pratt, our very own Shoreview Environmental Quality Committee, said that throughout the Metro County, they are acceptable at hazardous waste sites. And the only reason for being hazardous is it's a microelectronic. An LED is similar to why you don't just throw your computer out or your TV. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. I'll wrap up with or move on to the next topic, beyond LED lights, talking about a heat pump water heater. Okay, same format. Heat pump hot water heater. Advantages, it's about the same size as a normal hot water heater. It uses only a third of the energy of other types of hot water heaters, gas or electric. 1/3 of the amount of energy. The payback is less than a year. Disadvantages, I don't know that this is a huge disadvantage. It can be. Most people with basements have hot water heaters in your basement. It requires about a 10 by 12 square foot, so about the size of a bedroom area in your basement, because frankly, it's getting the heat from the air in the basement. And so it needs a volume of space, and that's about what it needs. Cost, no question, it's more expensive than a non-heat pump hot water heater. I just checked a big box site where I bought my heat pump hot water heater, and an equivalent, just electric as opposed to heat pump hot water heater, cost $860 for the equivalent level. In other words, 50 gallon, that quality level. And it cost $1,100 for 50 gallon tank. Some of you may be familiar with the 11% sale. That kind of helped on that one. It dropped it even more from 1,100 less 11%. So just a picture worth 1,000 words. This is a heat pump hot water heater. It's a little bit taller than your standard hot water heater. I didn't put a measuring thing there, but a little bit taller because the top part there, you can see above that blue label is the heat pump part. That's the compressor and the other things that go into this, but just a little bit taller. But that is a heat pump hot water heater. Okay, I am going to move on then to the third topic, a heat pump clothes dryer. I think, in the case of heat pump hot water heaters, it's certainly become much more common. You see them in the ads that come out for big box stores and that sort of thing. Heat pump clothes dryers have not achieved that level of awareness. Throughout Europe and Japan, they're very common. They're just everywhere. But they only started to really come into the US about 5 or 6 years ago. And so they don't have quite the awareness that heat pump hot water heaters have. Okay, so let's talk about heat pump clothes dryers, advantages and disadvantages. Basically, it dehumidifies clothes and it's gentler than high heat. We basically, with gas dryers and electric dryers, we kind of bake our clothes, make it really hot. It's not always that easy on the fabric. But basically, the whole purpose is to get the moisture out. And so a heat pump clothes dryer dehumidifies the clothes gentler on them than just baking them. It dries in the normal amount of time if needed. And I'll kind of come back to that a little bit as I talk through the disadvantages. Like a heat pump hot water heater, it uses 1/3 the energy of either gas or electric dryers. So clearly a great advantage. It's one of the reasons why you saw the curve on my energy consumption drop off so much in 2021 with implementing both the heat pump hot water heater and the heat pump clothes dryer. Now, disadvantages. There are 2 lint filters to clean instead of 1. And it can take 2 to 3 times longer to dry. No question about it. It can. If you just let it run the way in its most efficient mode, it'll take 2 to 3 times as long to dry. But if you need it faster, this is my term, not the term on the dial, but you put it in like a turbo mode or a quick mode or something like that, and basically it becomes an electric dryer. And just like any other electric dryer in the market, it'll heat them up and it'll get it done in the same way that an electric dryer does if you just need something quickly. But I don't know if most people do this, but I know when I'm doing the laundry, I'll do it and then I'll run off and do some other stuff and go, oh yeah, I need to switch it, and I'll put it over there. And then I'm not always listening for exactly when it's done. I'll go back and, oh yeah, I had something in the dryer. So typically time isn't of the essence, but if it is, you can do it in a heartbeat just by pressing a button. Now, one of the subtleties of this is it reduces the cold air drafts because no air is vented outside. So let me give you a picture of what that means. And I'll touch on that in just a moment. I want to give you first a feel for cost. And so, again, I'm not pushing anything. I don't get paid by Warner Stellian to say this, but the reason I put their name in there is because it's available. Whirlpool, name we all know. Warner Stellian, name we all know. This is where I didn't want to get too definite about cost because I'm not much of an expert in levels of quality of washing machines and dryers. And so, it's, in my opinion, they're not inexpensive versions of washers and dryers. They're higher end. And so I thought, probably the best way to help give you that perspective is just, I took out the purchase order and said, oh, okay, so the washing machine was $810 and the heat pump dryer was $1,260. Certainly both are more expensive than the lowest cost ones you can get. I don't know enough about washers and dryers to compare them against a standard washer and dryer at that quality level. But for anyone that's bought higher level washing machines, I don't think this would be too much of a surprise to be in that range, but I just thought I'd put the numbers out there so that you have a feel for it. And to show you, washing machine on the left, dryer on the right, looks very conventional. Now, this is the point that I wanted to come and show you a picture and actually a little video here. This is something that we've all seen, right? On our houses, when you're running a dryer, especially in the wintertime, there's just a lot of discharge. You can see it, the white smoke coming out of there. Basically, that's the humid and warm air that's coming out of your dryer. It has to be exhausted because typically people are using gas, burning gas in order to create the heat. And so the exhaust has to go out, but typically people, even with electric dryers, send it all out. So for all of that air that's coming out, it's warm and it's high humidity, right? Every bit of the air that comes out has to come in the house. And so what happens is through all the leaks in your house and the windows and whatever else, it's drawing in cold air, the same amount that it's exhausting. So you're drawing in cold air that makes it kind of drafty in rooms. It cools it down. Definitely makes your furnace run more frequently because now you've got to heat that air up. So I've always found it kind of ironic in climate like ours that what we're trying to do is create warm air that's humid. Some people buy humidifiers to get the humidity. And here we're rejecting cold or warm and humid air in the middle of the winter, and then drawing it in through cracks in the rest of the house and heating it. So just an interesting little phenomena. Okay, one of the other dimensions or disadvantages that I talked about was the fact that you have to clean 2 lint filters. So I decided, the best thing to do is I'll cut a video, and here it is. So my anecdotal comment would be that my wife and I are completely on the same page on this one. Cleaning out the second lint filter, I can't think of another word other than it's just a little bit annoying. Oh yeah, I need to clean that too. But as you can see, it's not huge to do. It's just one more thing, right? So that's the whole purpose of this. Is that I wouldn't want anybody to be surprised. I didn't know there's a second lint filter. That's what we do to clean it. So. All right, so I'm going to leave the topic of heat pump clothes dryers. Hopefully a little bit of awareness there will help. And I'm going to move on to talk about solar panels. Solar panels, so advantages and disadvantages, same format. There's really no maintenance. They last 20 to 30 years. There's multiple buying options. There's all sorts of creative ways you can buy solar collectors, from you don't put any money up front to you own it outright. There's many different ways that you can do this. Roughly speaking, give or take, it's approximately at this point now about a 10-year payback. And so I'm trying to give you just some rules of thumb just to kind of put the perspective on it. Basically, the cost is in the neighborhood, the installed cost is in the neighborhood of $3 a watt, which translates to, for each solar panel, the standard, there's no standard size, but they're not that different in size, but roughly $1,000 per panel is about the ballpark of where it's at right now. In 2022, there's a 26% tax credit for solar systems. And so, if it costs you literally, if you spend, I'm just going to pick a number, like $10,000, you get a $2,600 tax credit. You just take your federal taxes, drop it by $2,600. In 2023, that drops to 22%. And don't know, obviously, where Congress is going to go from here. But that's just to give you a feel for the rough costs on solar panels. Disadvantages, I don't know. I've had solar panels, I think we put them on in 2010, so 12 years. Any disadvantages? I don't know. Appearance might be the thing. Some people don't like having a solar panel on the side of the house. Personally, in all honesty, I can't think of any other disadvantages. You put them up there, they don't require any maintenance. You save money, and we're already past the payback period. So thought, show you a picture. That's the side of my house. It's pretty subtle because it's on the south end. I wish I had more south-facing roof. There's only room for a dozen panels up there, but that's, some people don't like that look. It really doesn't bother me, but that's a disadvantage. Maybe there's others. I just can't think of any. So that's the topic, fourth topic of solar panels. I'm going to move on to talk about ground loop heat pumps. And these produce both heating and cooling. And this is something, it's a topic that kind of similar to heat pump clothes dryers. I don't think it's well publicized or well understood. And so that's a key part of what I'd like to get into here, show you some pictures and diagrams and just give you a feel. Okay, advantages. It fits the same space as a furnace. So inside, if it's in your basement, it's about the same space as a furnace, gas furnace. And there's nothing outside, kind of a nice advantage. You know, you've got the big, it's called a condensing unit, but the big air conditioner sitting outside your home someplace, making a lot of noise in some cases, less noise in others, but kind of a big thing out there. There's nothing outside. It's extremely efficient. You know, between all of these things put together, the average utility bill that I had for all of last year was $89, and that's for everything: heating, cooling, refrigerator, hot water heater, you name it, everything in there. I said before, it does provide both heating and cooling. Disadvantage: it's expensive, especially, no surprise, right? Especially in the city though. So a suburban lot, it's expensive because really the best way to make these work is to drill. If any of you are familiar with drilling wells for water, to pull water out of a well, it's basically the same thing. And so I have 10 drilled wells in my front yard, which of course you don't see, but that are 10 feet apart from each other. And so I got a lot of jokes from my neighbors about you're drilling for oil, or you know what exactly is going on there. But once you drill, you finish it up and you cover it up, you don't see anything. Definitely more expensive than a furnace or air conditioner. The other another disadvantage is that the air doesn't come out of the heat pump at quite the same temperature, a little bit lower temperature than a gas furnace. And so, you know, if you're pumping a gas furnace heat out of your ductwork and it was designed for that, and now you've got temperatures that are a little bit cooler than that, you need more air. And so more air goes through there. And so you can hear more air sound in the ductwork. So just to be, you know, totally transparent, it can be a disadvantage. I don't frankly think about it much, but it can be. The other advantage though, is it does connect to the ductwork in a house exactly the same way as a gas furnace. So this is what it looks like. On the right-hand side, there is the ground source heat pump, ground loop heat pump. And you can see on the top there, it just connects into the ductwork, basically the same as the gas furnace that this replaced. And so the return air that comes in kind of behind it all, you can kind of see on the right-hand side there, same ductwork that was in the house to begin with. Outside, the unit that I talk about, the air conditioner, your central air conditioner outside, don't have one of those anymore. There's just nothing there. And so what I would just point out here is in the lower right-hand corner, you see some black insulation coming out of the basement floor, and then it turns into white plastic, an elbow that goes around. Basically, that's connected to all of those 10 loops that are 100 feet deep in our front yard. So it's all kind of piped together, and basically, since the ground year-round in our area, actually most of the country, is in the 50 to 55 degree range year-round, that's where it's getting the heat. So it sounds kind of weird, right? 55 degrees, you're getting heat. And so the best way that I've ever heard of to explain this is up in the upper left-hand corner of this slide. It says, think about standing in front of your refrigerator. You know, you're searching through, you're looking for whatever you're looking for, and the refrigerator's on, and you feel warm air coming out at your feet. I think most of us have had that experience. That's basically a heat pump. That's basically a ground loop heat pump. So the refrigerators are kept typically between 37 and 40 degrees. Freezers are typically kept at about 0. You wouldn't think there's much heat at those temperatures, right? But in order to make it cold, basically what it's doing is taking heat out. And that is exactly what happens with these ground loop heat pumps. If you have water coming in at 50 to 55 degrees, that's a lot warmer than the food in your refrigerator at 40 or the food in your freezer at 0. And so there's heat in there. It's just heat is pulled out by dropping the temperature. And so hopefully that explanation does a little bit of demystifying over, sounds like magic. Well, it's great, but it's not magic. It's just extremely efficient. That's why it doesn't cost much to run your refrigerator. Last time you bought a refrigerator, if you take a look at the little tag inside, it'll tell you about how much it costs to run over a period of a year. I don't know if you're surprised. I know I am. Wow, that's all? Really? It's on all the time, and it just keeps running. So that's basically what a ground loop heat pump is. Hopefully that picture helps kind of give you a feel. Okay, I am going to move on then. We've covered the first 5 topics, and I'm going to spend a little time talking about electric cars. This is really quite a change that is happening, and it's happening at a fast pace at this point in time. Same format here. I'm going to talk about advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, well, how far can you go? Typically 200 to 300 miles. At least the way I live, unless I'm going on a trip, I would say almost never drive 200 to 300 miles in a day. So it's just not an issue. It has enough capacity. I just arbitrarily chose a number. 95% of my trips are less than 60 miles, but I have a hard time thinking anytime I drive farther than 60 miles, again, unless I'm going on a trip someplace. An advantage is you can just plug it in at night. Frankly, it's easier than a gas station stop. I don't want to put words in my wife's mouth, but I know that she said many times, when we first got one of these, I said, this is kind of my experiment, so I don't want to force you to go through and deal with things. So you can, you take the gas car, I'll take the electric car and live with it. What has been interesting over time is this actually kind of a car of choice, because never having to go to the gas station, it's really easy to drive, very quiet. So we'll just plug it in and we don't worry about it. Disadvantages. It can take, if it's fully discharged, and I haven't done that yet, but if it's fully discharged, it can take 8 hours to charge at home, which overnight isn't really an issue. You can't easily fill up like you can, obviously, with gas stations. So long trips become more challenging. I was just viewing something on the state of Minnesota site and some other sites about long distance. If you own a Tesla, you can drive across the country. There's various stations set up that are only designed to work with Tesla at this point. But at this point in time, from a practical standpoint, it is a disadvantage. You're not going to just head off to Florida without worrying about it, right? So that's a disadvantage. What I characterize as another disadvantage is that electric cars they're hard to get. Availability is kind of limited right now. It's growing very quickly, but it's not easy to get any car right now, but they're still a little bit more limited. The move that Minnesota made last year to become one of the greens, I've forgotten the term right now, but there's a term that Minnesota qualified for last year that now anyone who makes electric cars is now much more willing to ship electric cars into the state of Minnesota because of what we did. Disadvantage, a need for a charging station. I'm going to come back to that one in just a little bit. But it would be, remiss to wrap up with one of the advantages. I'm kind of a car guy. I almost went to Detroit to design cars. They're fun. These are fun to drive. Fast acceleration. They handle like sports cars because the batteries are typically way low underneath the floor. And from a driving standpoint, that you can take corners, it speeds faster than you probably should take them because the car isn't going to tilt much. It's got a lot of weight down on the bottom. Also, very little maintenance. When the 15,000 mile maintenance thing came up, I thought, oh, I'm just going to look and see, do I need to take it to the dealer? Because what are they going to do? And I looked up in the, the manual and said, the indoor carbon, or the, the filter for your cabin filter should be changed. I said, oh, okay. So I just looked up on YouTube, what's involved to do that? And it was like, oh, you turn this, you turn that, you take out, you open your glove compartment up, and here it is, you replace it. So I just did it because it was pretty easy. But that was the 15,000 mile maintenance. There's just not a lot of moving parts in these cars. And it's not like nothing can go wrong, but there's just a lot less moving parts. And so that's definitely an advantage. Okay, so I mentioned charging station. I want to talk about this a little bit to give you a feel. This is a charging station. Had it installed in my garage. And so I mentioned this isn't going to be a lot of technical jargon, but typically in your house, you've got 110 volts. That's what we plug into. This is 240 volts, which is the same as what your stove and dryer or hot water heater, frankly, electric hot water heater, that's what they run on also. So it's not anything different. It's just a different voltage than the normal plug. You can use the normal plug. It just takes about 4 times as long as this particular charging station does. So I decided to invest in that. Cost about $1,300. And as I mentioned before, I'm giving you some ballpark feels. Sometimes I've been able to get work done because I've got other work going on. So I don't want to say, oh, absolutely, this is it. But to give you a ballpark, that's about what it cost. And frankly, the electrician that was doing the work for me said, yep, I've done this. I could just do it along with the other things I'm doing. He was wiring, getting us ready for the heat pump dryer as well. He said, it'd be easiest if you just wanted to buy it. So I went on Amazon and ordered it, and it delivered, and he installed it. And so that's just a ballpark feel, but about $1,300 to install. As I mentioned before, it's easier, it's cleaner than filling the gas in the car. I usually plug it in overnight. This is a picture. So on the left, it's the front of the electric car. You just take off a little, you open up the door. It's like a gas tank door. And then you've got that black rubber plastic thing that's hanging down the lower left. Just pull that out and it's ready to go to plug in. And the picture on the right is plugged in. That's the charging station with the cord just plugged in. So I know these things are kind of hard to picture until you do it. So I thought, well, maybe the best thing to do is, instead of just showing you a picture of what it looks like with the plugs, I'm going to show you what plugging it in involves. So I'm going to show you both plugging and unplugging videos. So that's all charging is, and certainly a lot quicker to just hook it up, of course, than going to a gas station. It takes longer to charge than you would in the few minutes or it takes to fill up a gas tank. But that's basically what it looks like. And so similarly, the unplugging process. So hopefully, while a picture may be worth 1,000 words, hopefully a video is worth even more to kind of show you what it takes to deal with electric cars, deal with the heat pump dryer. Everything else is fairly transparent. If you have LED light bulbs, it's really not any different. You turn them on just like any other thing. Solar panels, you get them installed and you don't have to do anything else, basically. The same thing with a ground loop heat pump. Once you have installed, you change the air filter. I mean, it's basically the same type of interface. And same thing with a heat pump hot water heater. But a heat pump dryer, again, you do have 2 lint filters instead of 1. And on an electric car, you definitely need to plug it in. You don't have to do it every day. And we don't. We just kind of monitor it and say, okay, we're not really going anywhere. We don't need to keep charging it every night. We just kind of keep an eye on it and charge it when it looks like it needs it and don't. And over time, there's something called range anxiety, and that's no matter what, you think, oh, I don't want to be stuck someplace, right? And so it takes a while to get your confidence built up that actually, and I can go a long ways. Again, 200 to 300 miles is a typical range for most electric cars now coming out. So, so hopefully those pictures and the videos can help to demystify some of these products that are becoming a little bit more common. So at the beginning, I said I was going to start with showing you where we're going to end up. So that's what I'm going to go back to again, this curve. So you can see over this period of time, basically the first 2 years of 2004, 2005, I use those as just base years to say, well, how much gas are we using and how much electricity are we using? And I actually have every Xcel Energy bill since 2004 saved. So I have all these records going back every month, way back then. And so I just kind of set up a spreadsheet and monitor it. And so that's the reason why I look forward to my Xcel Energy bills, is I like to add the numbers in and see where they're going. But basically, you know, in the beginning, as I mentioned before, about 3/4 of the energy was going into gas. That's that gray line. And the red line is electricity. That's about 1/4 of the energy. And that was just going into lights, stove, oven, and plugging in things, air conditioning as well. Over time, you can see how the electricity really started to drop as I implemented just putting in higher efficiency light bulbs. You know, something that simple. Frankly, they were kind of expensive in the beginning, so I started a little bit more gradually. You can kind of see that gradual. It kind of hit a bottom around 2008. And so the difference between where it hit and the amount of energy it used to take, that difference is enough to run an electric car about 12,000 miles a year, at least the one that I bought. But then you can see the red line, you know, it bounces around a little bit. It started to go up. And so why did it go up? Well, in 2010 is about August of 2010 is when we put in the ground loop heat pump. And so over that winter between 10 and 11, the energy consumption just plummeted. Hardly used any gas, right? Because now all of a sudden, if you remember that pie chart, most of it was going toward heating. And so all that was left was the dryer and the hot water heater. So that's why that gray line plummeted. And you can see the red line, the electricity, go up because it was using an electric driven heat pump. And so of course that would go up. So kind of, you know, did some other things. I added solar in 2012 and that's why it went down. The red line went down. And basically, it's not like it's untouched, but didn't do a lot of other major changes until putting in the heat pump dryer and heat pump hot water heater in 2021. And so you can see electric then start to drop. The gas goes to zero because basically not using it anymore. And then the total, the black line of the total drops. And so that's kind of you've seen each of these pieces along the way. That's kind of the running commentary. So that the end result is basically a 77% drop in the energy that this house consumes. And the total annual cost is a little over $1,000 a year at this point. So hopefully that sequence of seeing the curves and then seeing the products and how they work a little bit, and then this narrative will help you understand that curve. Let's go back to the takeaways that I put up there. That fact that heat pumps, you know, you don't hear that word a lot, but basically it's not new. Those, again, refrigerator, dehumidifiers, air conditioners, they've been around us for decades and they're very reliable. It's not new technology. They're very proven. And so one thought to take away is, well, I don't know about, you know, heat pump, fill in the blank, whatever it may be. I don't know if they're reliable or not. Well, you know, as by education, I'm a mechanical engineer and heat pumps are very reliable. I mean, they've been used so long that it's no mystery as to how to make them more reliable. These are things to consider. So again, I emphasize this, that changing to LED lights, because they're very cost effective nowadays, can really save quite a bit of energy. Initially, when I got done changing all the lights, it was about a 25% drop just in my electricity consumption. And so I found actually that was quite a bit of energy. And so ran an electric car for about a year. The other thought to leave with is, well, most of us certainly wait until your hot water heater fails before you replace it, because it's not a lot of fun to replace it otherwise. It's even less fun to replace it when it fails. But basically, if you have an older hot water heater, you might want to consider getting ready for it. So making sure that, getting electrical set up so you can put higher voltage right there. If you have a electric hot water heater, you've already got it. It's right there. It runs off the same voltage, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you have a gas hot water heater, which at least half of the homes do, then you'd have to do a little extra planning. It's hard to just call an electrician and have them do this same day. And you might want to consider just replacing it ahead of failure so that you can kind of be ahead of the curve, because I don't know, just something to consider. For many people, covering windows with plastic can help a lot, especially if you have single pane windows. Just one pane. Certainly the newer homes since the 80s have dual pane windows, but if you have a lot of leakage, covering those windows with plastic would make a big difference. If you don't already have a night setback thermostat, very helpful to set it down at night. Saves quite a bit of energy. There are some great services out there for home energy analysis. It's something that we tend to do quick blurbs on in the Shore Views magazine. It's something that we've talked about over a long period of time, but home energy audits for $50 or $100. Xcel Energy typically augments that price, and that's why it's only $50 to $100. They do a great job. The teams that come out, I've had it done. They do a great job at analyzing your home and giving you good suggestions. So definitely something to consider. And if you're going to do it now. Do it when it's winter, because you can better tell where the leaks are, because the sensors that they use sense heat losses. And so do it while it's cold. So now is the right time to get an home energy analysis, home energy analysis done. And finally, City of Shoreview has some great funds available. And so, contact the city about these, but their home improvement, home energy efficiency improvements have funding to help do that. Okay, the other takeaway that I mentioned before is the one that, again, I just hadn't thought about it. Just never really thought about it before, that 25% of the energy going into my house was for electricity and all the things that use electricity. This is before we made all these changes. And 75% of it, 3/4 of it, was the gas. And of that, the vast majority was heating. And hot water heater and dryer are certainly parts of it, but the vast majority was heating. And as I mentioned in the beginning, from a safety standpoint, one of the things that I've kind of moved into this all electric home over a period of time, but it is a little bit of a relief. I usually had multiple carbon monoxide sensors around with gas furnaces just to make sure. And there's really not a lot that we as consumers or as homeowners can do about gas leak explosions, other than you smell gas and just leave the house, right? Just don't even make a phone call from there. You don't want, the electricity from your phone doing anything. Just leave the house and make a call. But those things can happen with gas, and they do every now and then. Fortunately, it's not that often, but those are some takeaways, hopefully to leave you with. And that's the graph that I know had a big impact on me when I realized how much energy goes into heating our homes. And so I learned a lot basically by going through this, and hopefully been able to relate a few of those lessons learned to you as well. So that brings us to a wrap, questions and comments. And I think I'm gonna go into the chat room here. And okay, so great question about, Claire, do you need to remove the snow from panels? So personally, because I'm kind of an energy nerd, it bothered me to no end to have snow pile up. And what I learned is that most of the time in the winter, it's not really covered with snow, but typically what happens is when we have one of those big snowstorms followed by dropping below zero for a period of time, it's over, it's covered. And so when that happened, I let it go for about a month, and it made me crazy to think, these panels are sitting there and they're not doing anything. And so I rigged up something the panels are above my garage, I rigged it something to kind of pull the snow off, which isn't a lot of fun because it all comes on you, at least the way I did it. And I had to stop doing that when I started, I think, having what do you call it, rotator cuff. I could start to feel that because it's an unusual thing to be pulling snow back and pushing down, you know, to keep the squeegee thing that I was using to get the snow off. And so I stopped doing that. But so bottom line is, I think behind your question is, does that get in the way in the winter? It can. It just depends. Typically though, you know, they're black and they're facing south toward the sun. And so what I've typically found is that if you even a part of it open, that being black and absorbing that sun tends to kind of heat up. And once you heat up one part of it, it tends to kind of spread because that heat will help remove the rest of the snow. So there are, you know, weeks where really not much energy is being collected, but for the most part, it still collects energy, just not as much in the winter. Okay, so next question is point is the filter cleaning video. Kind of good to get a feel for how long it takes and whether it's annoying. And so, yeah, so Melissa, thank you for that question, I think, or statement, I guess, more than a question. Basically, she got a kick out of the fact that I was wearing my slippers. I didn't realize that for doing the EV charging videos, but it really is as easy as that. You know, we just go out, oh yeah, plug it in, and there's an app, you know, so I can take a look and see, did I plug it in? I can't remember. And I'll take a look on my app. Or one of the nice things about, you know, I haven't done exhaustive research on all electric cars, but one of the nice things about it is you can preheat it. You can turn it on. You're sitting there and thinking, oh, I'm going to be going someplace. It's really cold out. You can turn the heater on in the car. If it's one of those days you really don't feel like getting out in that kind of weather and going through the thing that we go through, waiting for our cars to warm up. Because with a closed garage door, it doesn't matter, right? It's not burning gas. There's no carbon monoxide in there. And so, yeah, you can turn your heater on in your car if you want to pre-warm it. I've done that a couple times. The energy side of me kind of keeps my seatbelt on for doing that too often. I have a hard time doing that, but yeah. Okay, let's see. In the Q&A, when I say a heat pump needs 11 by 13 feet, is that just open air space, or is there an insulation other than tower? So let me give you the technical answer. And I said this was going to be technical, but it needs 1,000 cubic feet. And so if you think about, most basements are 8 feet high. If you take 1,000 divided by 8, you end up with 125. And so I think I mentioned about a 10 by 12 or something like that space, size of a bedroom. That's why the space. That gives you about 1,000 cubic feet. And that's about all the space. Now, if you have more than that, it's better, right? So if like your whole basement is open to the hot water heater, it's even better. It'll just run more efficiently. But the manufacturer just requires basically that, you know, roughly 10 by 12, 10 by 13 area in order to run. So do I have a sense for how much yard space you need for the ground loop? Any concern about getting the equipment into your yard? So yeah, actually, if you think about a 9 draw a piece of paper and do 9 dots, right? 3 by 3, 10 feet apart. That's 9 of the wells. And then one more added on, like a little tail, 10 feet apart. That's the grid. So how much yard space was needed? Basically, because it's basically 20 by 20 with an extra little shot that's 10 feet to the side. That's all it takes. 10 by 10, or in my yard for that size, 20 by 20 with that additional little tail of 10 feet. Any concern about getting the equipment into your yard? So basically, you know, a truck about the size of a fire truck. You know, if you've ever seen people out in the country drilling wells, it's like that. They're pretty tall and they run these drills down, and it's a pretty big truck, but they were able to just back up from the street right onto the yard, and just took them about a day to do each one, a little bit less than a day, but to do each one. And it's quite a spectacle in the front yard, but The reason we put it in the front yard is because they could get to it. It wasn't practical to put it in the backyard. And so, yeah.
I actually have a question for you, John. So as someone who's not exactly the best at home projects or whatnot, when it comes to installing these sorts of products, whether it's a charging station for a vehicle or these heat pumps in the ground loop heat pumps, are there specialized companies or people that you have to look for and reach out to, or can any sort of like an installer do this or have experience doing this?
Yeah, so probably different answers for each one. And so if it makes sense to you, what I'm going to do so that I don't accidentally gloss over anything is just to go back into, it's not bringing me back up here. Well, I won't do that. So step number one is I went through it. LED lights, not a, just unscrew, screw it in, not a big deal. The second one that I put in that order was the heat pump hot water heater. From that standpoint, installation of a heat pump hot water heater really isn't any different than a regular hot water heater. You need to connect the plumbing. They have to hook the electricity to it. The difference would be that if you had only a gas hot water heater and you're moving to a heat pump hot water heater, you'll need an electrician to get the higher voltage sent over to that area. But if you've been using an electric hot water heater, half the hot water heaters in US homes are electric and the other half are gas. So odds are 50% you've got an electric hot water heater, you're already set. They'd have to do a little bit of adaptation to the plug, but otherwise not a big deal. The heat pump dryer, again, if you've got an electric dryer, you're set. The plug, it's there. So no change. You can go to, a retailer, buy it, and really is not any different than doing electric dryer. The nice thing is, personally, it felt great because I showed that video of the air coming out with the steam and all. It's really personally satisfying to be able to close that. In other words, take out all that stuff, and there's that cold pipe. If anybody, I'm sure you all identify with this, in the middle of a cold winter, your dryer is freezing, right? That it's just freezing. And you no longer have that. You don't have that pipe of just, a 4-inch pipe coming into your house with nothing in the way until it hits the door of the dryer. And, that's it. Well, basically, you stuff insulation in there and seal it up and you're done. There is no more leakage going out there. So that was very satisfying. But otherwise, dryers, not really a problem. Solar panels, absolutely need a solar company. It's climbing on your roof, it's making sure you're drilling in the right places, it's connecting all the panels the way they need to be connected, electrical hookups, everything else, definitely need a solar company to do that. I would not touch it, right? I don't trust myself to do that. So definitely. For the ground loop heat pump, same thing. Just like I wouldn't put my own furnace in, same thing. There are many companies, you hear them on the radio or you hear ads. There are quite a few people that install these. And so when they do, it's just like, it's just the same as when you put a gas furnace in. Like, great, you get a couple quotes, you go through what you go through, but you don't do anything for your gas furnace either. And lastly, the electric car, absolutely have an electrician. If you're going to put a charging station in your house, and I would advise it, but if you put a charging station in, an electrician can do that. It really not a big deal to put one of those in. And then beyond that, buying an electric car, there's just there's a lot of little things that you learn, but they're not really much different than driving a gas car. They're even more fun. I mean, they pick up and go like that. It's amazing. There's a thing called torque. And in electric cars, electric motors have torque, and they will just wind up and go. If you want to get on the expressway very quickly, if you floor it, it's just amazing what that thing will do. So a lot of fun to drive, as I mentioned. So does that hopefully demystify your interface question?
It definitely does. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. All right, well, thanks for the questions. I think they're a good clarification. questions and comments. And all right, so that personally was a lot of fun to put together. So thank you for anyone watching. But it's been kind of a long road to hoe over this period of time, but it's just kind of what I think about. So hopefully by sharing some of those things, it helps people up the experience curve just a little bit. So Maria, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, John. And again, great job. You answered, again, some questions and covered a lot of things that I hope people now like understand a little bit better the process and how easy some of these things actually are to do and how helpful they are. And thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you for everyone who is in attendance. Thank you for being here. This presentation has been recorded and it will be available again for viewing on the city's local channel 16, that loop, as well as on the city's website. If you have any questions or want to reach out to Jeff or me about anything he talked about, feel free to do so. I know Jeff had his contact information at the very beginning of the presentation, but I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer questions, and you can always reach out to me and I can send them over to him as well. But thank you everyone again for attending. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it so much. You did a fantastic job.
My pleasure. Thank you, Maria.
All right. Well, if that's it, I think we can all have a wonderful night. Thanks again, John. Thank you. Thank you for all who attended. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Have a good night.